views and opinions expressed in this program are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect the views of BronxNet or the program underwriters.
All right, coming up on this edition of Today's Verdict, illegal listings on websites such as Airbnb have become a major issue in the state of New York. Without knowing all the implications, both guest and host can find themselves in need of an attorney. We'll get the chance to learn more on the issues surrounding Airbnb during today's show. Then later, a little boy stops by to give us a few thoughts on how nice it is to be 6 years old. We call this new segment Talks with Brody. Well, as you can see, we have much to get to, so stay tuned. Today's Verdict starts right now. All right, hello, and welcome to Today's Verdict, a live and interactive show that gives you your legal rights and options. I'm your host and trial attorney, David Lesh. Well, Today's Verdict is always encouraging you to stay connected. Make sure to tweet us at Today's Verdict and hashtag Ask Today's Verdict if you have a question. Also, make sure to like us and follow us on Facebook at Today's Verdict, and check us out at BronxNet.tv/Bronx Legal. And last, but certainly not least, don't forget to tweet me at David Lesh. Well, in the state of New York, you are not allowed to rent an apartment for less than 30 days. Airbnb and other rental sites that allow this to happen are considered to be illegal. Before we dive into the topic, let's take a quick look and find out what Airbnb is all about.
Airbnb is a community of people who share their space for travelers from all over the world.
Hosts can connect with travelers who are looking for a place to stay at a variety of different price points.
There are places that are like my home where you share the home.
Or you can take a private home and be completely on your own. There are all sorts of unique options like lofts and tree houses.
We like to stay on boats or unusual accommodations like hobbit houses.
Igloos, camper vans, you name it.
The choices are limitless.
When you travel with Airbnb, you travel with real people and real neighborhoods.
The host will take very good care of you. They provide you with recommendations to places that they go, that they like.
Airbnb has changed the way that I travel because I have a whole lot more options than I would otherwise, because I can choose the particular neighborhood or where I want to be, something that's close to what my interests are.
You actually do get to live like a local.
So you're in a neighborhood, there's neighbors around just kind of living their daily life, and it's much more of a kind of real life experience of that town.
Well, joining us today is the Associate Editor of Skift, Deanna Ting. Hi, Deanna. Thanks for coming. I'm not quite sure I would be looking for a treehouse. All I hear about is Airbnb. What's the attraction? I don't get it.
You know, when Airbnb first got its start in 2008, it was just a way for its founders to make money. They were struggling designers, and they knew that a design conference was coming to town in San Francisco, so they decided to rent out these air beds and offer some breakfast to 3 guests, and thus Airbnb was born.
I mean, you think that this really should have been done sooner. The fact that you could avoid going to a hotel and stay, I don't know, at somebody else's home and save the money, and also get that feeling of really what the community is like without the hotel feel.
Right.
But no one had done this. And then all of a sudden, boom, we have this site, and now we have a lot to discuss because of it.
Right.
Have you ever used the Airbnb site?
I personally have used Airbnb before. In the instances where I've used Airbnb, I've always used it with groups of friends. I used it once to travel to Tokyo in Japan, and I also used it another time to stay in Waikiki in Hawaii.
How was that?
It was great. It was very nice. And you know, Airbnb, it's so talked about, and it's also so controversial because it's sort of this interplay of all these different facets. It does provide you a really unique local experience that is hard to replicate in a hotel. But at the same time, it's all taking place within the confines of a home. So, it's sort of that gray area of, is this a home? Is this a commercial business? Like, how do we define the definitions of what
Well, where
this
does it all
really is?
start? Does it start with a website or a phone call? Tell me how this
Yes.
works. Right?
So to use Airbnb is basically an online marketplace. It lets people rent out their homes on this platform, and it also lets people look for homes to stay in on the platform.
All right, so let's say I wanted to use it. Do I have to pay a fee just to get on the site, or I'm just log in and I started out?
Totally free to sign up, whether you're a host, a person who rents, or a guest looking for a place to rent. And basically, you just sign on. You can give, a few pieces of basic information like your name. You put up a profile photo.
I don't have to put a retainer down or anything like that.
No, not at all. Yeah.
So I'm looking for a place to. Where does Airbnb have properties?
So Airbnb has about 2.5 million listings in more than 191 countries around the world. So it's pretty much almost everywhere except a few countries in the world.
And it's still growing, I assume.
And it's continuing to grow.
All right, so once I'm on the site, what types of searches are there? Give me an example.
Right. So when you go on the site, let's say you want to go to Paris. And Paris is Airbnb's #1 market worldwide. So you'll go onto the site and they'll have like a search toolbar, and you just type in Paris and it'll bring up all of these listings. And to help you sort of refine the listings, you can check off, if you want to be in a certain neighborhood, if you want to have a private room in a shared space, or if you want to have access to an entire home or apartment, or if you want to room or be hosted by a super host, or if you're a business traveler, if you want a business travel ready listing, you can look for all these specific things when you're doing your search.
So let's say you click on a particular property. Let's talk about what you see in terms of the people who own the property. Do you get a picture of them? What does it look like?
You do, yes. Both hosts and guests have their profile photo shown.
But do they take the picture, or you just send up whatever picture you want?
You can put whatever photo you want.
All right. Now that leads to an issue that many people have been discussing in the news, that some people feel that their properties are not being looked at or rented just based on the way they look themselves, as opposed to the property. Right. All right, let's call it what it is. That's really racism. Right. What are your thoughts about that?
Well, so as far back as 2014, Airbnb has known about this potential problem on its platform. Two Harvard researchers noted that there was bias against hosts who weren't white. Okay. And they followed up that research in 2015 that showed that there was also bias from hosts against guests who weren't white, or guests who had
so it worked both ways.
American. Yeah, so it works both ways. Basically, any online platform, can be a place where bias and discrimination can take place.
Now, I understand that this bias occurs throughout life all the time. Right. But on the other hand, this is a financial transaction, and we have laws that prevent this types of discrimination in New York and the United States. Is Airbnb taking this seriously? What are they doing to prevent this from really happening?
They definitely are taking it seriously. So after these pieces of research came out, and after this huge social media campaign sort of exploded this year, it was kind of represented by the hashtag Airbnb while Black. Airbnb took a really hard look at what its platform was enabling, and it tried to find solutions to prevent, or at least sort of minimize, the possibility of bias and discrimination from taking place on its platform.
And how are they doing that?
So they hired some big guns. They hired former Attorney General Eric Holder and appointed him as an advisor to help them with this. They also hired Laura Murphy, a former ACLU director, in its legislative office in Washington, D.C. And Laura Murphy spent the greater part of this year crafting a really comprehensive discrimination report that was published in September by Airbnb. And this report really, examined, and tried to identify what the problems were and try to put forth solutions that Airbnb is set to implement on November 1st.
What would that be? How can you
Yes.
really prevent somebody not
Right.
wanting somebody else at their property based on how they look? How do you prevent somebody from doing that? Racism happens all the time,
Right.
and yet you don't really know it's happening, but it's in your brain. It's happening.
Right.
How do you prevent somebody from doing this?
Exactly. The simple solution would just be like a hotel, right? Instant booking, which is something that is available
Right.
on Airbnb.
Why shouldn't you have the opportunity to not be able to see the people back and forth until after you already sign the contract and
Right.
say, I want your property, and you said, okay, here's my money. Now, by the way, here's what I look like, and here's what you look like.
Right, and that's exactly what critics of Airbnb's discrimination policies have pointed out. So, you know, Airbnb, as part of its new rules and policies that it's implementing on November 1st, is not eliminating the photos. So there is, but it said that it would sort of minimize the appearance of the profile photos on the site. And it's also enacting a couple other different policies that it's putting into place that are supposed to kind of make things look
Were
a bit
there ever
better.
situations where people were putting on pictures that were not really themselves?
Oh, of course.
Just to make
I'm
sure that
of it.
somebody would actually, and this is not a
Right.
dating site, but just to
Right.
make sure that they might want the property where they wouldn't want the property before.
Exactly, yeah. So.
Well, so now you're on the site, and
Mm-hmm.
there are pictures and the property. From what I understand, there's a waiver with respect to your ability to bring lawsuits against the company. Am I correct?
Yes.
Let's talk about that.
So, when you sign the terms of service on Airbnb, you basically waive away your right to file a class action lawsuit or to sue Airbnb. And Airbnb it's an online marketplace, so it's protected by certain laws that sort of take away any major liability for the company.
So let's be clear. You can't sue Airbnb in a court of law with a judge and a jury. You can only arbitrate, correct?
Exactly, yeah.
Doesn't seem fair, but you sign away that right.
Right.
And what do the politicians and the public think of that? Should we change that, or are we going to? Is that something that isn't being litigated?
So that is actually the crux of some major lawsuits that Airbnb is currently engaged in. So one of the primary federal laws that protects online marketplaces and platforms like Airbnb or like an eBay from having this sort of like legal liability is this law called the Federal Communications Decency Act, which basically, it's sort of, I guess the analogy I use is like, let's say you and I are on eBay and I'm trying to sell you, I don't know, a watch, but it's actually a fake watch. eBay is not responsible for the fact that I am selling you a fake watch. It's just a transaction between the two of us. So they're sort of just like the platforms are these third parties that don't necessarily assume legal liability.
Unless eBay should have known that you were selling me a fake watch, because you've been selling fake watches to everybody for the last 3 years on eBay, and they should have knocked you off. Then I would bring in a lawsuit against eBay, but I can't.
Right.
Right. So
Yeah.
we could always think of different ways. All right. So no class actions. You only can arbitrate, basically, and that really does protect Airbnb, and hopefully that will change at some point. Does it look like there's a backlash against Airbnb right now because are they becoming too big? Is that what's really happening?
Well, they are worth an estimated $30 billion right now, which is actually more than the market caps of both Hilton and Hyatt combined. So it's pretty large. I don't necessarily know that, there's certainly a lot of regulatory battles that Airbnb is fighting in certain destinations, and New York being one of them. But I think it's mixed. Some people really, like as we saw in that video, really love Airbnb and the community that it fosters and the opportunities that it gives for people to travel all around the world.
But by the way, there are a lot of pros and cons.
Yes, lots of
which
pros
we're
and
going to
cons.
save. But we're going to take a quick break. But there's a lot of pros and cons that the hosts and the guests should know, right? All right. We have to take a quick break, but don't worry. We'll be back with more Today's Verdict right after this.
They said a bottle was just a bottle. That no one would ever notice me. But I knew I could be more. that one day I would make people smile.
There's a shelter pet who wants to meet you. Meet one today. Visit theshelterpetproject.org. Adopt.
Hey, I'm Darren Jaime. I'm the host of Wednesdays Open right here on BronxNet Television, Channel 67, and also on Verizon Files, Channel 33. Want to invite you every Wednesday. You get an opportunity to see what's going on in the world of news, current events, debates, public information. That's what happens here on Open every Wednesday. So we invite you to join us right here on BronxNet Television.
Wow, these are really good.
You act surprised. Practice makes perfect.
You don't have to be perfect to be a perfect parent. There are thousands of teens in foster care who don't need perfection. They need you.
All right, well, welcome back to Today's Verdict. I'm your host, David Lesh. We are always encouraging you to stay connected. Tweet us at David Lesh. We will continue discussing Airbnb and legal issues surrounding the site with Associate Editor at Skift, Deanna Ting. Deanna, okay. We got hosts and we got guests.
Yes.
And we're going to give some tips and talk about the pros and cons of this site for both of them so they know what they're getting into. Let's start with this one. Let me throw this one at you. Okay. One benefit, I would think, is that you don't have to worry about booking a hotel, and you don't have to worry about, other guests or other people bothering you, right? But on the other hand, there are local laws that you're probably not too familiar with, where a hotel would take care of all these things for you, renting a car, whatever else you need. What do you do about the local laws of Paris, let's say? I mean, does Airbnb make sure that both are in compliance or no?
No, it does not. I mean, so Airbnb's formal MO with regard to local laws is that it advises and it informs its hosts and its guests to know what the local laws are. And they do have information on their site that sort of talks about the local laws in different jurisdictions, but it's really up to the host and the guest to really know for sure what's considered illegal or illegal in that particular city.
You're originally from California, right?
Yes.
And you're in New York. Let's take the example of somebody who's coming from California and they're looking to stay in a New York property. What's the law in New York? Are they allowed to do this? Are they not allowed to do this?
Right. So the law in New York is probably one of the strictest in the U.S. And it's like that for a lot of different reasons. New York has historically battled the growth of illegal hotels since the early 1900s. And so back in 1929, it established this multiple dwelling law to address that. And in 2010, that law was updated. And the law as it stands today says that if you reside in a Class A apartment, which is an apartment unit in a building of 3 or more units, which is a large majority, basically, yeah. And you can also look this up online with the city to make sure what kind of classification your apartment is. But if you live in an apartment like this, you cannot rent out the entire apartment for a period of less than 30 days. However, let's say you live in a 2-bedroom apartment and no one's occupying your 2nd bedroom and you want to be a host on Airbnb, and if you are present in the apartment when you have guests staying with you, that would be considered legal.
Assuming the lease allows you to do this. But the point is you're there.
Right.
It's when you're not there. And what's the concern here in New York? Is it money? Is it safety? or is it both?
It's all kinds of things. I mean, it's definitely, Airbnb would make the argument that the hotel lobby here in New York is vehemently, anti-Airbnb.
But can't you also make the argument that, these hotels do pay taxes on the monies that they get?
Exactly.
You tell me that anybody who's renting their apartment for 30 days is going to be letting New York State know that they were operating it as a mini hotel for a month? Of course not.
Yeah, that's the problem. But New York also refuses to form a voluntary tax collection agreement with Airbnb like it has done in other cities because of that very fact. Because I think lawmakers here feel like that if they do that sort of like legalizes this activity. But, with regard to taxes, Airbnb kind of leaves it up to the hosts to figure all that out. And you by law, you should be reporting any income tax that you have.
Of course you should. But whether it happens or not is the really issue here. All right, so the pros and cons there in terms of New York. Mm-hmm. Let's talk a little about insurance, because this is really important. Who pays for the insurance if something goes wrong? In other words, let's say you're from California and you rent my apartment for the 30 days, and you're allowed to. Let's say you're allowed to. Mm-hmm. And there's damage that you or somebody that you come with does to the apartment.
Right.
Who pays? Does the Airbnb have insurance? They're going to help repay the damage to the sofa or to the vase? Or should I have my own insurance? Did you have insurance? How does it work?
Right. So I think it's generally advisable for hosts, if they're planning to be hosts on Airbnb, that they should supplement the insurance that Airbnb already supplies.
And what is that? How much is that?
It's up to $1 million, but there are certain exceptions. Like I don't think it covers pets or artwork or jewelry or things like that. So you have to read the fine print carefully. But if you're very, very concerned about what could potentially happen to your property,
you should get your own insurance.
Yes, yeah.
Your excess insurance or whatever type insurance that is. What types of things can really go wrong here? Is it that it's misrepresentation of the type of place or what it looks like, not corresponding with the local law? What seems to be happening over and over and over again with the Airbnb?
I mean, you read these stories all the time in like the New York Post, for instance, or
they use as brothels.
Right,
I mean,
yeah,
you read the crazy things.
Like
but what's most often the real beef here?
On the part of guests, I think sometimes it's maybe perhaps the rental wasn't necessarily as it was advertised, or maybe the cleanliness of the apartment isn't up to that guest's own personal standards. Like everyone sort of has.
Can you write a review when you're done so that the next person gets to say, hey, this isn't for me?
Exactly. So after a stay is completed, both the host and the guest review one another, and that sort of gets put on record, and that's what other people, that's what also helps inform other guests who are looking for hosts to stay with when they're doing their searches for places to stay.
So what tips would you give to somebody who's going on the site for the first time now? What would you say? What's the first thing you would say, this is the first thing you got to make sure you do when you're on there? I mean, I don't know, read the fine print, read the comments. What would you say?
Yeah.
Use the site.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, definitely read the terms of service. It's very long, but scan through it. If you're a guest who's looking to book an Airbnb listing, be specific about the amenities that you want. Look for, if you don't want any surprises in terms of your stay, you should look for a business traveler ready listing or look for certain amenities that you need. If you're a host.
Yeah, the host. What does the host be thinking?
Yeah, if you're a host, there's a lot of things you need to consider. You definitely need to task yourself with educating yourself about what the local laws are, what you need to do, what you need to do for safety, for any legal liability, for insurance purposes. You need to kind of take all of these different things into consideration.
Any predictions you have in terms of where the industry is going in the next 5 to 10 years?
I think this industry is here to stay. I don't think it's going anywhere.
Do you think there are going to be some more laws that are going to crack down on it, or?
Definitely,
right now it's a little more of a free-for-all.
Sort of, but a lot of cities, New York included, are sort of smartening up, and they're trying to craft legislation that really sort of puts down some firm restrictions on what what is legal short-term rental.
Great stuff. You're going to come back in the next 6 months and we'll see how the industry is progressing.
Yeah.
All right.
Totally.
Well, in other news, we got a chance to have a small talk with my son, Brody, on our new captivating segment, Talks with Brody. Let's take a look at what he had to say. The question I wanted to ask you, which is the most important question tonight, is about pizza, because you're wearing a pizza shirt. What's so important about pizza?
That everybody likes pizza.
Come on, you want to tell anybody? Do you want to tell anybody about your bar mitzvah? No?
No.
What do you got in your hand there? What is that?
Microphone.
Microphone that you didn't want to wear?
Yeah.
Okay, what do you want to say in there? You can talk into it. Go ahead.
Where, here?
Yeah.
I don't know. You said we could do math.
Okay, you want to do math? Okay, put the microphone close to you so we can do math.
Yeah, okay.
What do you like about math?
That I like to do time.
All right, what's 2 times 2?
That's easy.
What is it?
4.
What's 4 times 4?
I don't know.
16? All right, what's 2 plus 2?
4.
What's 4 plus 4?
8.
That's pretty good. What's 8 plus 8?
16.
Very nice. What's 16 plus 16?
32. 34. 120. 100.
Wow, 128. Okay, all right, see, that's a lot.
256. 512. 1024.
All right, put that close to your mouth. The last thing I wanted to ask you is you know, you're going to have a bar mitzvah one day, am I right? Yeah, what do you want to say to people watching you at your bar mitzvah? Thanks for coming?
Yeah.
Yeah? Are you going to dance?
Maybe.
Yeah, who are you going to ask to dance? You have a girlfriend?
No.
You sure?
No. No.
Do you want one?
No.
All right, well, get that close to your mouth. Is there anything else you want to say to me before you leave? Anything you want to say? Anything you want to do? It's all yours.
I don't know.
How about you love your mother?
How about I have a wedgie right now?
Oh, no. All right, we're out. Well, that's all the time we have for today. I'd like to thank our guests for joining us, and of course you, the viewers, for watching. If you missed any part of today's show, be sure to check it out at www.bronxnet.tv. Also remember, if there's a legal issue or a topic you'd like to see on a future edition of Today's Verdict, feel free to contact me at davidlesh@bronxnet.org or tweet us at Today's Verdict, and make sure to hashtag Ask Today's Verdict. For myself and all of us at Today's Verdict, always remember, know your rights, know your issues, reach a verdict. I'm David Lesh, and we will see you again in 2 weeks with an all-new episode of Today's Verdict right here on BronxNet. Take care.
Hey, did you know 2.4 million loving cats and dogs in shelters and rescues need our help to find a home? Let's go to theshelterpetproject.org and meet if you are in a shelter near you. Harlow, oh, she's one great listener and loves to hear all your stories. My kind of cat. Cerulo is a sweet, goofy boy who's eager to please. Sounds just like another dog I know. So go to theshelterpetproject.org, search your local shelters and rescues, and go for a cuddle with your next best friend. Adopt.